Well, let's start deep cleaning. Agreeing with my husband's words, we set out to scrub every corner of the house. We both work a lot, so we seldom get a chance to really clean like this. So, we were determined. At that time, we never imagined what was about to happen. My name is Sarah. I'm a 48-year-old part-time worker. My husband, John, is the same age and works a full-time job. We have a son, but since he started his job, he moved out of state, so now it's just John and me. We moved into this house about 5 years ago. John's dad was getting sicker, and John wanted to be close to keep an eye on him, so we moved to an apartment near his parents' house. However, John's dad passed away just a year later. Despite this, we didn't see a reason to move again, so we've stayed here. John's mom lives alone in the old family home, just a 5-minute walk away. She likes to be in control and wants to be appreciated for it. John says she's always been like this, but it's gotten worse since his dad passed away. She's quite dependent, loves John as her son, and seems to wish we would move in with her. She sees me as an obstacle, but she is afraid of being disliked by her son, so she never says anything outright. The most shocking thing so far was when she brought a hand-knit scarf. It had a big heart on it and was embroidered with John's name. That definitely surprised me. On top of that, it seems she even suggested to John, "Why don't you divorce your careless wife who neglects the housework for her job and live with me?" But ever since John made it clear that he doesn't appreciate his mother's pushy behavior or her habit of making him thank her repeatedly to assert her superiority, things have gotten slightly better, I think. She probably feared being disliked by John. But for me, my mother-in-law is more than just a nuisance. The other day, she brought over a mountain of vegetables, saying, "My friend of a friend gave me these, so I'm giving them to you." Upon closer inspection, they were clearly wilted and starting to rot, entirely unusable. Even when I tried to politely decline, she snapped back. "Are you trying to make me look bad? My friend of a friend worked hard to grow these." I mean, it's a friend of a friend and not a friend of hers. I don't think it should really be a big deal, but apparently it's important for her. She's also brought over strange dishes saying, "I made this, try some." Once I decided to give it a try and it was unbelievably terrible. I'm not sure if she intentionally made it terrible or if she just realized it was terrible after making it and decided to pass it off onto us, but despite her claims of being, "I just like taking care of people," she's mostly just annoying. I can't help but wonder if there's something to be done about her desire for recognition. Since her husband died and she's been alone, I've stayed quiet thinking she must be lonely, but I've been thinking I need to say something before I get crazy. This happened a few days ago and I've spoken a little to John about it. "I wish your mother would stop showing up suddenly, especially with food without checking first. It's quite a bother. Could you maybe talk to her, John?" John, who's less often at home than me, seemed unaware of this, responding, "Oh, really? I thought she always called before coming over." The next day, while I was at work, my mother-in-law called my cell phone. She never calls, so I assumed something was wrong and hurriedly answered. "Sarah, I'm making curry today. What time will you be home? Let me know so I can bring it over," she said, leaving me at a loss for words. That's not what I meant at all. John must have talked to his mom about our conversation from the day before. No one asked her to call and bring food over. What I wanted was for her to stop showing up unannounced and to stop bringing us things. But I guess John must have relayed the message in an indirect way. So I directly told her I wasn't sure what time I'd be home, as I might have to work late and that we didn't need any food because we still had leftovers from the night before. Nevertheless, she said, "Then I'll just leave it at the front door," before hanging up, disregarding my refusal. And sure enough, when I got home, there was a container of curry next to our front door. Who knows how long it had been sitting there? It was left directly on the ground and I was concerned about the sanitation, so I didn't feel like touching it. I decided to tell John about it when he got home. After a while, when John came home, I told him about what had happened with his mom today. John then said, "Huh? I haven't had the chance to talk about it yet. I was thinking of having a proper conversation this weekend." It was weird because I had assumed that he had already talked to her. From that point on, when I mentioned to John, "The grocery store is having a sale tomorrow, could you come with me?" we would run into my mother-in-law at the grocery store. And when John would tell me, "I got movie tickets, it's for a show this weekend in the evening," we would run into my mother-in-law at the movie theater. It was all very strange. Each time we would ask my mother-in-law how she knew we were there, but the answers were always because she heard about the sale, or because she heard that this was a good movie. I'm afraid that she might see my iPhone while I'm away, so I try to hold it wherever I go, but my mother-in-law's frequent visits didn't stop. John and I talked about how creepy it was, but we still had no idea the reason. Then the day came when we started spring cleaning. "We just have this room left to clean," we said, moving on to the final room, the bedroom. In the corner of the bedroom, I realized that plugging into an unused outlet, it was a power strip we didn't know. We knew the outlet was there, but we seldom used it because we don't need much power outlets for the bedroom. And yet, here was this unfamiliar power strip. John and I looked at each other puzzled and wondered, "What's this?" John then picked it up and pulled it out. As he examined the unplugged power strip, his face went pale. I frowned, unsure of what was going on, and looked at him. John set the power strip down and gestured for me to leave the room. Once we stepped into the living room, John said in a hushed voice, "This might be a bug." "What?" Taken back by his unexpected words, I furrowed my eyebrows. John asked me again if I recognized the power strip, but I had no recollection of it at all. Come to think of it, we had watched a TV show together recently, and it mentioned that power strips were commonly used for planting bugs. And if it was indeed a bug in there, that would mean someone had been in our bedroom. But who? And why? We exchanged glances, wondering if we should report this to the police. I was confused with a mix of discomfort and fear, but then the doorbell rang. It was my mother-in-law. "Here, this is a sweater for you, John. It's getting colder these days. This will keep you warm, so make sure to wear it," said my mother-in-law, handing over the sweater to John with a smile. She added, "It would be troublesome if you catch a cold again," and that made me confused. We were in the middle of deep cleaning, and once it was done, we planned to wax the floor. The wax would take over half a day to dry, so we told my mother-in-law we were planning to stay elsewhere for the night and asked her to leave. After she left, John and I discussed, and it turned out he was thinking along the same lines. "I wonder, should we report this to the police, even if it is family?" I asked him in a low voice, but John looked conflicted. "It's just that if we call the police over this, it would be embarrassing for the family, and we don't know the purpose." We had suspicions that my mother-in-law might be the one who had planted the bug. We had numerous questions, like how she could have entered and planted it, or why she would do such a thing. But lately, my mother-in-law had a tendency to appear at the locations we were discussing in our bedroom, and like her comment about John's cold, something we hadn't directly told her about made us suspicious. We assumed that my mother-in-law was the perpetrator and discussed how we could gather evidence to either confront her or call the police. After discussing various possibilities, John seemed to have an idea and said, "Leave it to me," then heading off to the bedroom. John took the bug to another room and plugged it into a power outlet. He then covered it with a newspaper and pointed a fan towards it. I was puzzled, but John explained it to me. By covering it with a newspaper and blowing air at it, a rustling sound would be picked up by the bug. Anyone listening would surely think it had malfunctioned. Sure enough, that made sense. If they thought it was malfunctioning, they would either retrieve it or try to plant another one. "Let's see what happens over the next few days." If my mother-in-law found some excuse to visit and managed to get into our bedroom without us noticing, then we could catch her and confront her. Though he had said we should watch for a few days, the incident happened quicker than we had expected. We had told my mother-in-law earlier that we would be out for the night, but due to these unexpected events, we decided to skip the floor waxing, canceled our plans, and stayed home. Then, in the middle of the night, we heard the front door unlock. Surprised, John and I looked at each other, and then the bedroom door opened. I seized the moment and turned on the light. There stood my mother-in-law. "Weren't you supposed to be out for the night?" Stunned, my mother-in-law spoke up. "I canceled our plans," I told her. "We found a bug in our home. We had tweaked it a bit to make it seem like it had malfunctioned, so I thought maybe the perpetrator would come to check on it." With that, my mother-in-law took a step back. However, John was not going to let her get away so easily. He took the key to our home from her hand. "We never gave you a spare key, did we?" At John's words, my mother-in-law turned pale. "So, I thought you'd sneak into our bedroom during your visit, but instead you entered with a spare key and planted the bug? Is that it?" I glared at my mother-in-law. "What is a bug? What are you talking about?" Playing dumb, I went to get the bug. I covered this with newspaper and pointed a fan at it. If you were listening, you'd have heard a rustling sound. You thought it was malfunctioning and came to check on it, didn't you? I spoke with a firm tone, but my mother-in-law simply looked away without saying a word. I'm getting angry. It's quite absurd, but it seems there are people who bug others as part of their bullying. Were you looking for my weak spots? Or did you want to know more about John? Or maybe you missed him. You heard us talking about where we were going, and that's why you often ran into us out and about, right? I understand you might be lonely since your husband passed away, but this is a bit much. Even after I said all this, my mother-in-law refused to look at me. I continued. By the way, it's unacceptable to leave food on the floor in its container without even bagging it. It's dangerous and unhygienic. We end up having to throw it out, which is a waste. Also, we can't use all of the vegetables you bring that are on the verge of spoiling. John, who had been listening all this time, started to nod, then opened his mouth. Oh yeah, and it's really scary to suddenly come here without thinking about our convenience or to be ambushed at our destination. To put it simply, it's annoying. It seems that he had left her shocked. She started sobbing. But after Dad passed away, you hardly ever come over, and whenever you do call, it's to tell me not to bring anything or something else that makes me sad. Why do you only care about your father? I just wanted to see you, so I had no choice but to go visit you. And just like you, Sarah said, I thought if I brought things you needed, you would say thank you. But lately, you guys don't ever say thank you. My mother-in-law began to cry hard. I was utterly confused by now, and it seemed she just wanted to see John, her only son, and be thanked. I can't keep up with her desire for recognition. It's true that John cared more about his father than for his mother, but I know there was a good reason for that. But my mother-in-law either forgot that or she was crying in an attempt to pretend it never happened. Annoyed, I ended up saying, "Of course he's going to care more about his father who worked hard, did household chores, and raised him while his mother was gallivanting around with his father's money." In fact, my mother-in-law loved to go out and was often away from home even when John was little. It seems his father thought the presence of a mother was necessary, so he never opted for divorce, but John clearly stated that the person he was grateful for was his father. I don't know if his father ever noticed, but according to John, my mother-in-law even had affairs. As she got older and her husband died, leaving her with less money spent freely, the men who used to spoil her no longer paid her any attention. It seems that's when she started seeking attention from her son. As I said this, John nodded. "Yeah, that's why it's hard when you say I should be grateful to you. We were actually thinking of moving after Dad passed away, but Sarah was worried about you since you are old and suggested we should at least check on you from time to time. That's why we're still here. Aren't you the one who should be grateful?" Then my mother-in-law started to sob again, repeating how lonely she was. In response, I found myself saying sternly, "If you're lonely, does that mean it's okay to break in, install bugs, and commit crimes?" Then my husband chimed in. "Embarrassing as it is to say, I think we might have to involve the police. She hasn't even apologized." At that, her sobbing stopped abruptly. "No, that's not what I meant. I'm sorry. I'll apologize, so please, don't call the police." Her antics started to look quite ridiculous, and I couldn't help but laugh. "So, what did you mean? It's strange to make a copy of the key without permission, and I don't think it's normal to even consider bugging someone. It's definitely creepy. Can we agree to cut all ties moving forward?" Then my husband showed her the door, telling her, "If you don't want us to report this to the police, the least you can do is stop bothering us." After that, we discussed and decided to move. Of course we didn't tell my mother-in-law where we were going, and we didn't even tell her that we would move. In fact, my husband had been contemplating a promotion that would require moving to the next county for a while now. With this recent event, we decided to accept it. When we didn't report my mother-in-law to the police, she handed us money, saying it was compensation for the trouble she had caused, and she said that the issue was over. We took the money, but still severed all ties with her, making it official with documents drawn up by a lawyer. After we moved, we heard that my mother-in-law had become depressed, but we saw it as karma. We weren't here to fill up with her desire for recognition. Our new home was close to where our son lives, so we get to see him more often. While our son is important to us, he's an adult now. I can't understand why my mother-in-law would be so obsessed with her adult son. Speaking of our son, he's mentioned he's thinking of getting married, which I'm looking forward to. Using my mother-in-law as an example, I intend to do my best to build a good relationship with my future daughter-in-law.